I still remember the weight of his duffel bag when I hauled it up the stairs to my apartment that first night. It was the kind of beat-up olive green canvas thing you see at army surplus stores, and it smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and the desperation of a man who had nowhere else to go. That was Ethan. He stood in my doorway, 6'2" of slumped shoulders and a broken spirit, holding a six-pack of cheap beer he'd bought at the gas station on the corner of Maple and 3rd, the one with the flickering sign that always made the neighborhood look like a crime scene. He had that look, the one you get when life has knocked you so flat you're not even sure you want to get back up. His wife of 6 years, Jenna, had kicked him out. She'd found the credit card statements, the ones he'd been hiding for months, and then she'd found the text to a girl named Madison from his gym. The whole thing was a cliché, a bad country song, and watching him stand there, I felt a knot of pity and frustration twist in my gut. I told him to crash on my couch as long as he needed to figure things out. I didn't think twice. I was being a good friend, the kind of friend I'd want in my corner if my world ever fell apart. I had no idea that in letting him in, I was setting a match to every carefully built structure of my own life. The first couple of weeks were awkward but manageable. He was a ghost in my living room, sleeping late, watching ESPN on mute, and ordering takeout with the last of his crumpled cash. My girlfriend Mia was patient at first. She'd come over after her shift at the pediatric clinic, her scrubs still smelling faintly of antiseptic and that vanilla-scented hand sanitizer she loved, and she'd step over his shoes by the door with a tight smile. She was a good woman, Mia, the kind of woman you build a future with. She had this way of looking at me, her brown eyes soft and steady, that made me feel like I was the only person in a crowded room. We had plans. We'd been together for 4 years, and we were saving for a house in the suburbs, the kind with a big porch and a yard for a golden retriever we talked about getting. We'd even picked out names for our future kids, a secret game we played on long car rides. It was real, it was solid, it was everything I'd ever wanted. But Ethan's presence was like a grain of sand in a well-oiled machine. He'd make these dark jokes at dinner about marriage being a trap, and I'd see Mia's jaw tighten. She didn't like him. She never said it outright, but I could feel it in the way she'd avoid his gaze and the way her body would go rigid if he sat too close on the couch. I chalked it up to her protectiveness, her seeing the mess he was and worrying he'd drag me down with him. I thought she was being a little judgmental, a little cold. He was my best friend. We'd known each other since we were teenagers, back when we used to hotbox his beat-up Ford Ranger in the parking lot of the abandoned Kmart. He'd been the best man at my brother's wedding, the guy who helped me move out of my parents' house, the guy who was supposed to be my ride or die. I wasn't going to abandon him just because he'd made a few spectacularly bad choices. The atmosphere started to change in subtle ways I didn't recognize until much later. It was like watching a Polaroid develop in slow motion, the image becoming clearer and more damning with each passing day. Ethan started to emerge from his depression. He showered more, he dressed better, he started leaving his duffel bag unzipped with expensive-looking shirts peeking out. He got a job, a consulting gig downtown, and he started coming home later. He started talking about getting his own place, about moving on. He'd pour himself a glass of my good whiskey, the one I was saving for my promotion, and he'd talk about the future with this newfound energy that I mistook for resilience. I was proud of him. I thought I was helping him rebuild himself. I didn't see the way he was looking at Mia, not at first. I didn't see the way his eyes would linger on her when she bent over to pet my cat, or the way he'd find excuses to be in the kitchen alone with her when I was in the shower. I was so busy being the good guy, the savior, that I was blind to the heist unfolding in my own living room. Mia, for her part, became quieter. She stopped coming over as much, citing late shifts and exhaustion. She'd text me good night, and it was always short, always a little clipped. When I'd ask if something was wrong, she'd just say she was tired. I believed her. I was an idiot. I was a willfully blind, trusting idiot who thought that love was stronger than loneliness and that loyalty was thicker than the blood of a cheap, opportunistic thirst. The night everything changed was a Tuesday. I'd been working on a big project for my marketing firm, and I'd told Mia I'd be late. I was the last one in the office, the janitor had already done his rounds, and the building had that hollow, humming silence that only an empty corporate space has. My back ached from hunching over my laptop, and my eyes were dry from staring at spreadsheets. I just wanted to go home, crack open a beer, and crash. I didn't call ahead, I never called ahead. That was the one thing I did differently that night, the one deviation from the script of my ordinary life. I just drove. The city lights were blurring past my windshield, and I was thinking about a house I'd seen online earlier that day, a beautiful colonial with a wraparound porch. I was thinking about how I was going to surprise Mia with the offer we were about to put in. I was thinking about our future. I pulled into my parking spot, the one with the cracked concrete and the faded number 23, and I remember the air was thick with the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. It was that particular humidity you get in late spring when the world is holding its breath. I jogged up the stairs, my footsteps echoing in the stairwell, and I fumbled for my keys. I was thinking about what leftover pizza was in the fridge. I was thinking about the latest episode of that show we were watching. I was thinking about nothing, then I turned the key in the lock and I pushed the door open. The first thing I noticed was the candle. It was one of Mia's, a big, expensive one in a glass jar that smelled like sandalwood and vanilla. It was on the coffee table, flickering, and it was the only light in the room. The second thing I noticed was the silence. It was a heavy, charged silence, pregnant with something I didn't want to name. My heart started to thud against my ribs, my eyes adjusted to the dim light. I saw Ethan's jacket on the floor and next to it a woman's heel, not just any heel. The black patent leather pumps I'd bought Mia for her birthday, the ones she'd been saving for a special occasion. Then I saw them, they were on the couch. The couch I sat on every night. The couch where we'd watched movies and eaten popcorn and fallen asleep together. They were tangled in the throw blanket, the one my grandmother had knitted, and they were kissing like their lives depended on it. His hands were in her hair and hers were on his back, pulling him closer. It wasn't just a drunken mistake. It wasn't a quick, guilty peck. It was deep, it was passionate, it was the kind of kiss that spoke of a fire that had been burning for a long time. It was the kiss of two people who had crossed a line and had no intention of going back. I just stood there in the doorway, my hand still on the doorknob, and I felt the floor drop out from under me. The world tilted. The reality I had been living in, the reality where I was the good friend, the good boyfriend, the man with the plan, shattered into 1,000 pieces at my feet. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I just watched the two of them, my best friend and my girlfriend, betraying me in the most intimate way possible in the heart of my own home. It felt like an out-of-body experience, like I was watching a movie of a man's life falling apart, and I was the only one in the theater. The blood roared in my ears, drowning out the sound of their soft, wet whispers. The smell of the candle was suddenly nauseating, cloying, mixing with the smell of her perfume and his cheap cologne. I felt a cold rage starting to pool in my stomach, a deep primal thing that was going to either make me scream or make me kill someone. They finally pulled apart, laughing, and then Mia turned her head. She saw me. Her face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if it hadn't been so devastating. Shock, confusion, and then a horrifying recognition. She didn't look guilty, she looked caught. There's a difference. Guilt implies remorse. She just looked like she'd been interrupted in the middle of doing something she had every right to do. She scrambled off him, clutching the blanket to her chest, and in that moment I saw her for who she really was. I saw the lies she'd been telling me with her quiet dinners and her soft smiles. I saw the betrayal in every single night she'd told me she was too tired to come over. Ethan just sat there, his shirt unbuttoned, his face flushed, and he had the audacity to look at me with this weird mixture of defiance and pity. He didn't even get up. He just sat there like he was the king of my castle and I was the trespasser. Mia started, but her voice trailed off. There were no words, no excuse in the world could cover what was sitting right in front of me. I remember the sound of my own voice. It was low, gravelly, and it didn't sound like me. It sounded like a stranger's. I said, "Get out." I didn't know who I was talking to, maybe both of them. I just wanted them gone. I wanted the image burned out of my brain. I wanted the last 4 years of my life to not have been a complete lie. But of course they weren't. They were real. I was just the only one who had been living in that reality. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat on the floor of my bedroom, my back against the wall, staring at the closed door like it was a barricade against a world that had suddenly become hostile and unrecognizable. The apartment felt wrong, poisoned. Every surface, every corner, every shadow held the ghost of what I'd seen. I could still hear the wet sound of their kiss, still see the way her fingers had curled into his shirt, still feel the cold shock that had turned my blood to ice. After I'd screamed at them to get out, they'd scrambled past me like frightened animals, Ethan pulling on his jacket, Mia clutching her purse, neither of them looking me in the eye. The door had clicked shut behind them and then there was silence. The kind of silence that's louder than any noise. I'd locked the door, checked it 3 times, and then I'd retreated to my bedroom like a wounded animal crawling into a cave to die. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I didn't look at it. I knew it was her. I knew it was him. I knew they were both going to try to explain, to rationalize, to somehow make this my fault. I wasn't ready to hear it. I wasn't sure I'd ever be ready. The next morning, the sun came up like it didn't know the world had ended. It streamed through my blinds, that cruel, optimistic light that makes everything look clean and fresh, even when your soul is rotting from the inside. I finally looked at my phone, 47 texts, most from Mia, a few from Ethan. I scrolled through them without really reading them, my thumb moving mechanically over the screen. Asterisk, please answer me. Asterisk, asterisk, it's not what you think. Asterisk, asterisk, we need to talk. Asterisk, asterisk, I'm so sorry. Asterisk, asterisk, please just let me explain. Asterisk, Ethan's were more direct. Asterisk, bro, I fucked up, I know. Asterisk, asterisk, let me make this right. Asterisk, asterisk, it just happened. Asterisk, I laughed at that one. It just happened. Like a car accident, like a spilled drink. Like something that had no agency, no choice, no deliberate, calculated deception behind it. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack and clattered to the floor. I didn't care if it was broken. I didn't care about anything. I called in sick to work. I told my boss I had a stomach flu, which wasn't entirely a lie. The nausea was constant, a rolling wave of revulsion that hit me every time I replayed the scene in my head. I spent the day in a haze, moving from my bed to the kitchen and back again, unable to eat, unable to drink anything but water. The apartment was a museum of my former life. Her toothbrush was still in the bathroom. Her shampoo was still in the shower. A pair of her earrings were on the nightstand, little gold hoops she'd left behind after a sleepover. I picked them up and stared at them, these tiny, innocuous objects that now felt like weapons. I thought about all the things she'd told me, asterisk, I love you. Asterisk, asterisk, I've never felt this way about anyone. Asterisk, asterisk, you're my person. Asterisk, were they all lies? Was any of it real? Or had I just been a placeholder, a comfortable option, someone to pay the bills and hold her hand while she waited for something better? The questions were relentless, a pack of wild dogs tearing at the carcass of my self-esteem. I couldn't escape them. They were in the walls, in the floorboards, in the smell of her perfume that still lingered on the pillows. By the third day, the numbness started to wear off and the anger set in. It was a hot, seething fury that burned through my veins and made my hands shake. I wanted to destroy something. I wanted to break things. I wanted to drive to Ethan's new apartment and beat him until he couldn't see straight. I wanted to scream at Mia until my voice gave out, but I didn't do any of those things. Instead, I did something worse. I started to dissect. I started to obsess. I pulled up our text history, scrolling back through months of conversations, looking for clues I'd missed. The nights she'd been too tired. The days she'd been busy. The sudden, inexplicable shifts in her mood that I'd written off as stress from work. I saw them now for what they were, signs, red flags I'd been too trusting, too comfortable, too in love to see. And Ethan, God, Ethan. I thought about all the times he'd asked about her, all the times he'd lingered a little too long in the kitchen when she was cooking, all the times he'd found excuses to be alone with her. I had been so blind, so pathetically, willfully blind. The confrontation came on a Friday. She showed up at my door. I knew it was her before I opened it. I could see her silhouette through the frosted glass, could hear the nervous shuffle of her feet. Part of me wanted to pretend I wasn't home, to let her stand there and suffer like I'd been suffering. But the other part, the part that still loved her despite everything, needed to see her face. I needed to look into her eyes and see if there was any remorse, any shame, any trace of the woman I'd thought I knew. I opened the door. She was standing there in a simple white blouse and jeans, her hair pulled back, her face pale and drawn. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished somehow. Her eyes were red-rimmed and there were dark circles under them that spoke of sleepless nights. For a moment, seeing her like that, something in my chest twisted. I almost reached for her, almost. Then I remembered the way she'd looked at him, the way her body had molded against his, and the sympathy evaporated. You can't just show up here, I said. My voice was flat, emotionless. I was surprised by how calm I sounded. I had to, she said. You wouldn't answer my calls, you wouldn't respond to my texts. I've been going out of my mind. She tried to step forward, but I blocked the doorway. Tell me why, I said. Tell me how long, tell me everything, and don't leave anything out. I wanted to hear it. I needed to hear it like a man who can't stop pressing on a bruise. I needed to know the full extent of the betrayal to understand how thoroughly I'd been duped. She took a shaky breath and looked down at her hands. It started about a month ago, she said. When Ethan started getting better, when he started acting more like himself, he was so attentive, so present. He listened to me in a way you hadn't been listening. She looked up at me and I saw the first glimmer of defensiveness in her eyes. You were always working, always tired. You'd come home and you'd talk about spreadsheets and marketing strategies and you'd fall asleep on the couch. I felt like I was invisible. So this is my fault? I asked, my voice rising. This is because I worked too hard, because I was trying to build a future for us, a future you were supposedly part of. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You know what, Mia? That's bullshit. That's the biggest load of self-serving bullshit I've ever heard. You don't cheat on someone because they're tired from work. You cheat on them because you're selfish, because you're weak, because you don't have the courage to end things before you start something new. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know, she whispered. I know it's not an excuse. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just trying to explain how I felt, how I got there. She reached out and touched my arm. I jerked away like her skin was on fire. I love you, Jack. I do. It was a mistake, a terrible, horrible mistake. I never meant to hurt you. You never meant to hurt me, I repeated, incredulous. Then what the hell did you think was going to happen, Mia? Did you think I'd be happy for you? Did you think I'd just pat you on the back and wish you well? I was shouting now, my voice echoing in the hallway. An old woman from down the hall poked her head out of her door, then quickly retreated. I didn't care. You were in my apartment, on my couch, with my best friend, and you expected me to just… what? Forgive you, move on? I saw the tears start to roll down her cheeks. No, she said, her voice breaking. I don't expect anything, I had to see you, I had to tell you to your face that I'm sorry, I had to try. She was crying openly now, her shoulders shaking. It was a performance, I told myself. It had to be. She was a good actress, I'd give her that. But some part of me, the part that had loved her for 4 years, wanted to believe it was real. Wanted to believe she was as broken as I was. I stood there frozen, caught between hatred and love, between the urge to slam the door in her face and the urge to pull her into my arms and pretend none of this had ever happened. I hated that I still felt something for her. I hated that she could still reduce me to this, a trembling mess of a man who didn't know which way was up. What about Ethan? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Do you love him? She was silent for a long moment. The tears kept coming, but she didn't answer. That silence told me everything I needed to know. It was worse than if she'd said yes, because the silence meant she wasn't sure. It meant she had feelings for him, real feelings, feelings she was still trying to figure out. She hadn't just fallen into bed with him out of loneliness. She had fallen for him, and in that moment, whatever was left of my heart, whatever scraps of hope I'd been clinging to, shattered completely. You need to go, I said. My voice was steady again, but it had a finality to it that I didn't recognize. This is over. We're over. There's nothing to talk about anymore. She grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in. Jack, please don't do this. We can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can. I said go. I pried her fingers off my arm one by one. Go be with him. Go figure out whatever it is you need to figure out. Just don't do it here. Don't do it near me. She stood there for a moment, her face a mask of anguish, and then she turned and walked away. I watched her go, her footsteps echoing on the stairs, and I felt something inside me die. Not the love, not the anger, but the hope that there might be a way back from this. The hope that we could be saved. I closed the door, locked it, and slid down to the floor, and for the first time since I'd seen them on that couch, I let myself cry. It was ugly and loud, and it came from a place so deep inside me I didn't know it existed. I cried for the future I'd lost, for the trust that had been shattered, for the man I used to be, the man who believed in love and loyalty and happy endings. That man was gone. He'd been murdered in his own living room, and I didn't know if I'd ever find a way to bring him back. The weeks that followed were a blur of alcohol and isolation. I stopped answering my phone entirely. I stopped going to work. I stopped doing anything that required me to interact with the outside world. My apartment became my prison, and I was the inmate, the guard, and the warden. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, and I'd reach for her side of the bed. She wasn't there. She was never there. The emptiness was a physical presence, a heavy weight on my chest that made it hard to breathe. I thought about calling her. I thought about texting Ethan and telling him he could have her, that she was his problem now. I thought about a lot of things. But mostly I thought about how I'd gotten here, how I'd gone from a man with a future to a man with nothing but memories of a past that had been built on a foundation of lies. One night, about 3 weeks after the breakup, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was a photo. A photo of Mia and Ethan standing in front of a restaurant I knew well, the one we'd gone to on our anniversary. They were holding hands and they were both smiling. They looked happy. They looked like a couple in love. I stared at the photo for what felt like hours, my mind reeling. Who had sent this? Why? Was it someone trying to hurt me? Or was it someone trying to help me move on? I didn't know. I didn't care. All I saw was the two of them together in a place that had been ours. It was the final nail in the coffin of my relationship. It was the proof I needed that she had truly moved on, that whatever we'd had was dead and buried. I didn't respond to the text. I didn't try to find out who sent it. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I got up off my couch, I took a shower, I put on clean clothes, and I went outside. The air was cold, a sharp contrast to the stifling heat of my apartment. I walked for a long time, through streets I knew and streets I didn't, until I found myself at a bar, a dive bar, the kind with sticky floors and neon signs that buzzed. I sat down at the counter and ordered a whiskey, neat. The burn as it went down was familiar, comforting. I ordered another and another. I was halfway through my fourth when someone sat down next to me. I didn't look up. I didn't want to talk to anyone. Rough night? A voice said. It was a woman's voice, low and warm. I turned to look at her. She was pretty in a sharp, edgy kind of way. Dark hair, dark eyes, a leather jacket that looked like it had seen better days. She had a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and a glass of red wine in front of her. You could say that, I said. You could say that. She laughed, a short, humorless sound. Yeah, I know the feeling. She raised her glass. To the shittiest nights, she said, may they lead to the best mornings. I clinked my glass against hers. It wasn't a pickup. It wasn't even really a conversation. It was just two strangers sharing a moment of shared misery in a dark, anonymous bar. But it was something. It was a crack in the wall I'd built around myself. It was a reminder that the world was still out there, full of people who were also hurting, also lost, also trying to find their way back to the surface. The woman at the bar was named Claire, and she was a fucking hurricane disguised as a person. I didn't know that then, of course. All I knew was that she was easy to talk to, easier than anyone had been in a long time. She didn't ask about my ex. She didn't ask about my job or my family or any of the polite, surface-level questions that people ask when they're trying to size you up. She just sat there nursing her wine, and we talked about nothing and everything. We talked about the music playing on the jukebox, some sad country song about a man losing his dog and his truck and his woman all in one night. We talked about the bartender, a grizzled old guy with a handlebar mustache who looked like he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. We talked about the weather, the city, the way the neon lights reflected off the rain-slicked streets outside. It was mundane, it was trivial, but it was also the most human interaction I'd had in weeks. When the bar closed at 2 in the morning, we walked out together, our breath fogging in the cold night air. She lived a few blocks away, she said. She didn't invite me up and I didn't ask. We just stood there on the corner, two ships passing in the night, and then she was gone, swallowed up by the darkness. I walked home with a lightness in my chest that I hadn't felt since before everything fell apart. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't even relief, it was just a reminder that I was still alive, still capable of connecting with another human being. It was a tiny, fragile thread of hope, and I clung to it like a lifeline. Over the next few weeks, I started to see Claire more often. It wasn't planned. It wasn't some grand romantic gesture. It just sort of happened. We'd run into each other at the same bar, or the coffee shop down the street from my apartment, or the bookstore on 4th Avenue that had the cat that always slept in the window. She was a graphic designer freelance with a schedule as erratic as mine had become. She had this way of looking at the world that was both cynical and deeply romantic, a combination that I found endlessly fascinating. She'd make these cutting observations about people we saw on the street, and then she'd turn around and get misty-eyed over a particularly beautiful sunset. She was complicated and she was damaged, and I recognized something of myself in her. We started having dinner together, then we started having breakfast, then we started having everything. She was the first person I told the whole story to, the whole sordid, humiliating saga of Ethan and Mia and the couch. I expected her to be shocked or to offer me some hollow platitude about how I deserved better. Instead, she just nodded, her dark eyes unreadable. "People are shit," she said. "That's the first thing you have to accept. Once you accept that, everything else is just details." It was a harsh philosophy, but it was also oddly freeing. Claire didn't expect me to be perfect. She didn't expect me to be over it, she just accepted me where I was in all my broken, bitter glory. She was the first person who didn't try to fix me, and that more than anything was what I needed. We started sleeping together about a month after that first night at the bar. It wasn't passionate, not in the way it had been with Mia. It was something else, something more urgent, more desperate. It was two people using each other to forget, using each other to feel something other than the cold, gnawing emptiness that had taken up residence in their chests. It was messy and raw and completely without pretense, and for a while it was enough. For a while I thought I was healing, I thought I was moving on, but the anger was still there, festering beneath the surface. It came out in small ways at first. I'd snap at her for no reason. I'd cancel plans at the last minute. I'd drink too much and say things I didn't mean. Claire took it all in stride, her patience seemingly infinite. She'd seen worse, she said. She'd been through worse. She told me about her own past, about the ex-husband who'd cleaned out their joint bank account and disappeared with his secretary. About the years of therapy, the sleepless nights, the moment she finally decided she was done letting him control her life. "You can't let them win," she said. "That's the only rule. You can't let them destroy you, because if you do, they get everything. They get your past, your present, your future. They get all of it, and they don't deserve that. They don't deserve anything." I knew she was right. I knew I needed to let go. But letting go was harder than holding on. Holding on to the anger was familiar. It was a warm blanket, a comfortable weight. Letting go meant facing the unknown, facing a future that didn't have Mia in it, a future that didn't have the dream we'd built together. It meant admitting that I'd wasted 4 years of my life on someone who'd never really loved me. It meant admitting that I was a fool, and I wasn't ready to admit that, not yet. Then I got the call. It was from my brother Mike. I hadn't talked to him in months, not since the breakup. He'd tried to reach out, but I'd pushed him away like everyone else. I let it go to voicemail, then he called again and again and again. Finally, on the fourth try, I picked up. "Jack," he said, his voice was urgent, strained. "I need you to listen to me. There's something you need to know." "What is it?" I asked, my voice flat. I wasn't in the mood for another lecture about moving on, about how I needed to get my life together, about how I was wasting my potential. "It's Mia," he said. "She's getting married." The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered, grabbing the edge of the kitchen counter to steady myself. "What?" I managed. "To who?" "Ethan," he said. "They're engaged. I saw it on social media. Her sister posted it. They're getting married next month. A small ceremony, just family and close friends." I laughed. It was a hollow, manic sound. "Close friends," I repeated. "Like me? Am I invited to the wedding? Should I bring a gift? Maybe a new couch?" "Jack, stop," Mike said. "I know this is hard. I know you're hurting, but I thought you should know. I thought you deserved to hear it from me, not from some random post online." "I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. Really, I do. "But I have to go. I have to. I don't know what I have to do, but I have to go." I hung up the phone and stood there in my kitchen, staring at the wall. The news was like a fresh wound, a new cut on top of an old one. They were getting married. The two people who had betrayed me, who had destroyed my life, were getting married. They were moving on, building a future together, while I was still stuck in the past, drowning in my own misery. It wasn't fair, it wasn't right, and for the first time in months, I felt that familiar hot rage start to boil in my veins again. It was stronger this time, more focused, more dangerous. Claire came over that night. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked. I told her everything. The engagement, the wedding, the whole fucking thing. I paced around the living room like a caged animal, my hands shaking, my voice rising. "They're getting married," I said. "After everything they did, after everything they put me through, they're just going to ride off into the sunset like nothing ever happened. Like I never even existed." Claire listened, her expression calm and unreadable. When I was done, she walked over to me and put her hands on my shoulders. Listen to me, she said. You can't let this destroy you. You can't let them win. Too late, I said. They already won. They took everything from me, my girlfriend, my best friend, my trust, my self-respect. What else is there? There's you, she said. There's your life. There's everything you haven't built yet. You're not done, Jack. You're just getting started. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but the rage was too strong. It was a living thing, a beast that had taken up residence in my chest and was demanding to be fed. I started drinking again, heavier this time. I started showing up late to work or not showing up at all. I started picking fights with strangers on the street just to feel something. Claire tried to pull me back, tried to remind me of who I was, but I was too far gone. I was spiraling and I didn't care anymore. I just wanted to hurt them the way they'd hurt me. The opportunity came a few weeks later. I was at a bar downtown, a different one from the one where I'd met Claire. I was on my third whiskey when I saw him, Ethan. He was sitting in a booth in the corner, laughing with a group of friends. He looked happy. He looked like he didn't have a care in the world. And seeing him like that, seeing him so carefree and content, snapped something inside me. I walked over to his table. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to say or do. I just knew I couldn't let him sit there enjoying his life while I was falling apart. Ethan, I said. My voice was low, dangerous. He looked up and his face went pale. Jack, he said. I didn't expect to see you here. Obviously, I said. You look like you're having a good time, celebrating the engagement, I assume. He opened his mouth to say something, but I didn't let him get a word in. I leaned in close, my face inches from his. You're a piece of shit, you know that, I said. You were my best friend, you were supposed to have my back, and instead you took the one thing that mattered most to me, you took my life. My future, my everything, and now you're just going to marry her? Like it's all okay? Like you didn't completely destroy me? The people at his table were staring, their eyes wide. Ethan's friends started to stand up, ready to intervene, but Ethan held up a hand to stop them. Jack, I know you're angry, he said, his voice calm, measured. I know I hurt you, and I'm sorry, I'm genuinely sorry, but you have to move on, you have to let this go. Let it go, I shouted. You want me to let it go? You want me to just forget about everything you did? I was losing control, I knew I was, but I couldn't stop. The rage had taken over completely. You ruined my life, Ethan, you and her, you ruined everything, and I'm not going to let you just walk away from that. I lunged at him. I don't know what I was planning to do, hit him probably, maybe worse. But before I could make contact, his friends grabbed me, pulling me back. I struggled against them, screaming obscenities, but they were too strong. They dragged me out of the bar and dumped me on the sidewalk like a bag of trash. I lay there on the cold concrete, gasping, the rage slowly draining out of me, replaced by a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I had hit rock bottom. And for the first time, I was scared I might not be able to climb back up. I don't know how long I lay there, minutes, maybe hours. Eventually, I felt someone kneel beside me. I looked up and saw Claire. She must have followed me. She must have known I was going to do something stupid. She knelt beside me and looked down at me, and there was no judgment in her eyes, just sadness and something else. Something that looked almost like pity. Get up, she said gently. Let's go home. I shook my head. I can't, I said. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep fighting. Then stop fighting, she said. Let it go, let them go. They're not worth it. You're worth more than this. You're worth more than them. I looked at her, this woman who had come into my life out of nowhere and had refused to leave no matter how much I pushed her away. She had seen me at my worst, and she was still here. She was still standing, and in that moment I realized something. I realized that I had been so focused on what I'd lost that I hadn't noticed what I'd gained. I had been so consumed by the past that I had completely missed the present. Claire was right there in front of me, and she was real. She was real, and she was good, and she was everything Mia had never been. I reached up and touched her face. She leaned into my hand, her eyes closing for a moment. I'm sorry, I said. I'm sorry for all of this. For being a mess, for dragging you into my shit. It's okay, she said. That's what I'm here for. That's what we're here for, to help each other through the mess. I let her help me up. I let her take me back to my apartment. I let her hold me while I cried. And for the first time in months, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Someday I was going to wake up and the first thing I thought about wouldn't be Mia. Someday I was going to stop feeling like my heart had been ripped out of my chest. Someday I was going to be whole again, but that wasn't going to happen overnight. It wasn't going to happen without work, and it wasn't going to happen without help. I started going to therapy. Claire found me a therapist, a woman named Dr. Patel who specialized in betrayal trauma. It was awkward at first, sitting in a sterile office and telling a complete stranger the most intimate, painful details of my life. But she was good. She didn't judge. She didn't tell me what to do. She just listened, and she asked the right questions, the ones that made me think, that made me dig deep into the parts of myself I'd been avoiding. She helped me see that my anger wasn't just about Mia and Ethan. It was about me. It was about my own insecurities, my own fears, my own deep-seated belief that I wasn't good enough. I had let Mia define my worth. I had let Ethan destroy my sense of self, and now, finally, I was starting to take it back. I started going back to work. I started talking to my brother again. I started doing the things I used to love, the things I'd given up when everything fell apart. I went for runs in the park. I cooked meals for myself. I read books that had nothing to do with self-help or heartbreak. It was slow, it was painful, but it was progress. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward instead of just treading water. Claire was there through all of it. She didn't push me, she didn't try to fix me, she just walked beside me, a steady presence in the chaos. We didn't talk about the future, we didn't make plans, we just took it one day at a time. And that was enough, that was more than enough. Then one night we were lying in bed and she turned to me. "Jack," she said, "there's something I need to tell you, something I've been wanting to tell you for a while." My heart dropped. I was instantly transported back to that moment on the couch, the moment when everything fell apart. "What is it?" I asked, my voice tight. She took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant," she said. "It's yours." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible. I stared at her, my mind reeling. A baby, a child, a future I hadn't planned for, hadn't even dared to imagine, and for a moment I didn't know how to feel. I was scared, I was confused, I was overwhelmed, but underneath all of that there was something else. Something that felt a lot like joy. The word hung in the air between us like a grenade with the pin pulled, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what she'd just told me. A baby. Claire was pregnant, I was going to be a father. The thought was so foreign, so completely outside the scope of anything I'd been planning for my life, that it took a full minute for the reality of it to sink in. I'd spent the last year mourning a future that had been stolen from me, a future that had never really existed in the first place, and now here was this woman, this fierce, broken, beautiful woman offering me a chance at something real. Something that wasn't built on lies or betrayal or the desperate need to fill a void. It was terrifying, it was exhilarating. It was absolutely fucking terrifying. Claire was watching me, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. I could see the fear in them, the vulnerability she tried so hard to hide. She was braced for rejection, for me to run, for me to tell her I wasn't ready, that I couldn't do this, that she'd made a mistake. And for a split second, a tiny, cowardly part of me wanted to do exactly that. I wanted to get up, walk out the door, and never look back. I wanted to disappear into the night and pretend this conversation had never happened. But I didn't, I couldn't, because the look on her face, that raw, unfiltered hope mixed with terror, reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. It reminded me that I wasn't just a victim of my past. I was a man with a choice. I could let the anger and the pain define me, let it turn me into a bitter, lonely shell of a person, or I could choose something else. I could choose to be better, I could choose to be the kind of man who didn't run. I reached out and took her hand, lacing my fingers through hers. "Okay," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Okay, we can do this, we can figure this out." The tears that spilled down her cheeks were the first real tears I'd ever seen her cry. She was so tough, so guarded, that seeing her break like that even just a little made my heart ache. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice thick. "I know this isn't what you planned. I know you're still dealing with everything that happened. I don't want to add to your burden." "You're not a burden," I said firmly. "You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time, and this baby is a second chance. A chance to do things right, a chance to build something that's actually real. I'm not going to throw that away." She smiled, a watery, tremulous smile, and she leaned in and kissed me. It was a soft kiss, gentle, but it carried a weight of promise that I hadn't felt in years. We stayed up the rest of the night, talking about the future. Not making grand plans, just talking. About names we liked, about how we'd decorate the nursery, about whether we wanted to find out the sex or keep it a surprise. It was the most normal conversation I'd had in months, and it felt like a lifeline. It felt like the first step on a path I hadn't known I was looking for. The months that followed were a blur of doctor's appointments and baby registries and late-night trips to the grocery store for pickles and ice cream. Claire's pregnancy was tough on her. She had morning sickness that lasted all day, and she was exhausted all the time, and there were moments when I could see the worry flicker in her eyes, the fear that she wasn't strong enough to do this. But I was there. I was there for every ultrasound, every prenatal class, every sleepless night when she couldn't get comfortable. I held her hand during the labor, and I was the first person to hold our daughter when she was born, this tiny, squalling, perfect creature with Claire's dark hair and a pair of lungs that could wake the dead. We named her Lily. It was a name we'd both liked, simple and classic, and when I held her in my arms and looked down at her little face, I felt something shift inside me. The anger, the bitterness, the constant, gnawing resentment that had been my constant companion for so long, it all just faded. It didn't disappear completely, not yet, but it became quieter, less urgent, like a background noise that you eventually learn to tune out. Becoming a father changed everything. It forced me to think about the kind of man I wanted to be, the kind of example I wanted to set for my daughter. I couldn't be the angry, broken man I'd been when I met Claire. I couldn't be the guy who picked fights in bars and drank himself into oblivion. I had to be better, I had to be stronger. And that meant finally, truly letting go of the past. It meant forgiving Mia and Ethan, not for their sake, but for mine. It meant accepting that what had happened was a tragedy, a betrayal, a deep and profound wound, but it didn't have to define the rest of my life. I started writing. It was something I'd always wanted to do but had never had the courage to try. I wrote about everything. The betrayal, the anger, the depression, the slow, painful climb back to something resembling normal. I wrote about Claire and Lily and the future I was building with them. I wrote about forgiveness, not as a goal, but as a process, something that happened in fits and starts, something you had to work at every single day. It was cathartic in a way that therapy and alcohol and late-night conversations had never been. It was my way of making sense of the chaos, of putting the pieces of my life back together in a way that felt coherent and meaningful. Then, about 6 months after Lily was born, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Ethan. My heart seized in my chest when I saw it, and for a moment I wanted to delete it without reading it. I wanted to pretend it didn't exist, to go back to my life and my family and forget that he was still out there, still a part of the story I was trying to leave behind. But I couldn't. I had to know what he had to say. I opened the email, my hands shaking slightly, and I read his words. It was a long message, rambling and apologetic and full of the kind of self-flagellation that only a person who's truly fucked up can muster. He told me about his life with Mia. It wasn't the fairy tale I'd imagined. They'd gotten married, just like I'd heard, but it had fallen apart almost immediately. The trust issues, the guilt, the knowledge that they'd built their relationship on a foundation of lies, it had all caught up with them. They'd tried counseling, tried to make it work, but it was too broken, too tainted. Mia had left him 6 months ago. She was living in another state now with a new man trying to start over. Ethan was alone, he was in AA, he was trying to get his life together. And he wanted me to know that he was sorry. Not just for what he'd done, but for the person he'd become. He said he thought about me every day, he said he missed our friendship. He said he knew he didn't deserve my forgiveness, but he hoped that someday, somehow, I might be able to find it in my heart to give it to him anyway. I read the email 3 times. Each time I felt a different emotion. The first time I felt anger. The familiar, hot, righteous anger that had been my go-to for so long. The second time I felt sadness. Sadness for the friendship we'd lost, the years we'd wasted, the childhood we'd shared that now felt like a distant memory. The third time I felt something I hadn't expected. I felt pity. Pity for this man, this broken, pathetic man who had destroyed his own life just as thoroughly as he'd destroyed mine. He wasn't the villain I'd made him out to be. He was just a flawed, weak human being who had made a series of terrible choices, just like me. I didn't respond to the email right away. I let it sit in my inbox for a few days, letting it marinate. I talked to Claire about it, and she listened without judgment, her hand resting on my knee. "What do you want to do?" she asked when I was done explaining. "I don't know," I said. Part of me wants to tell him to go to hell, part of me wants to just ignore it and pretend it never happened. But another part wants to forgive him, not for him, for me, so I can finally truly move on. Claire nodded. "Then do it," she said. "Forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because you deserve peace. You've been carrying this weight for too long, Jack. It's time to put it down." I took a deep breath and I wrote back. It wasn't a long email. It wasn't flowery or dramatic. It was just a few sentences. "I got your email, I read it. I'm not going to pretend I'm not still hurt, because I am. I'm not going to pretend I've forgotten, because I haven't, but I'm not angry anymore. I've moved on. I have a family now, a good life. I hope you find the same. I forgive you, Ethan, for everything. Good luck." I hit send and I felt something lift off my shoulders. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A lightness. A freedom. It was the moment I finally stopped being a victim and started being a survivor. That was 3 years ago. Now I'm sitting on the porch of the house Claire and I bought last summer, watching Lily chase fireflies in the yard. She's 4 years old now, with her mother's wild hair and my stubbornness, and she is the most incredible thing I've ever seen. Claire is inside making dinner and I can hear her humming along to the radio, the sound of her voice drifting through the open window. It's a summer evening, warm and golden, and the world feels right. It feels whole. I think about how different my life is from what I imagined it would be back when I was saving for that house in the suburbs with Mia. I thought I knew what I wanted. I thought I had it all figured out. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. I didn't know that the worst thing that could ever happen to me would also be the best thing. I didn't know that losing everything I thought I wanted would lead me to everything I actually needed. I still have moments. Moments when the old pain surfaces, when I remember the sound of the door clicking shut behind them, the look on her face, the weight of the betrayal. It's not as sharp as it used to be. It's more like a dull ache, a scar that twinges when the weather changes. It's a reminder of where I've been, of the person I used to be. But it's also a reminder of how far I've come. I'm not the same man who let his best friend crash on his couch and watched his life fall apart. I'm someone else, someone stronger, someone who knows that love isn't about blind trust or comfortable illusions. It's about showing up every day and choosing each other. It's about forgiveness, both giving it and receiving it. It's about building something real, even when it's hard, even when it's messy, even when it's terrifying. Claire comes out onto the porch and sits down beside me. She leans her head on my shoulder and I wrap my arm around her. "What are you thinking about?" she asks. "Nothing," I say. "Everything. How lucky I am, how close I came to missing this, to missing you, to missing her." I nod toward Lily, who is now lying on the grass, staring up at the stars. "Me too," Claire says. "We almost missed our chance forever, didn't we?" "Yeah," I say. "We almost did. We sit there in comfortable silence, watching our daughter's small hands reach up toward the sky, trying to catch the fireflies that dance just out of reach. She's so innocent, so full of wonder, and I make a silent promise to myself that I will never let the darkness of my past touch her. She deserves better than that. She deserves a father who is present, who is whole, who has learned to let go of the things that don't matter and hold on to the things that do. The story of my life is not a simple one. It's messy and complicated and full of mistakes. But it's also a story of redemption, of second chances, of finding love in the most unexpected places. I lost my best friend. I lost the woman I thought I was going to marry. I lost my faith in people, in myself, in the very concept of happiness. But I found myself. I found a partner who sees me, really sees me, and loves me anyway. I found a daughter who looks at me like I'm the center of her universe. I found a peace that I never thought I'd have. I think about Ethan sometimes. I wonder if he ever found the peace I found, if he ever managed to put his life back together. I hope he did. I really do. Because despite everything, despite the pain and the anger and the betrayal, I don't wish him ill. I don't wish him anything but healing. That's what forgiveness does. It sets you free not from the past, but from the grip the past has on you. It allows you to move forward without carrying the weight of all that hurt. I look at Claire, her face soft in the fading light, and I feel a surge of gratitude so intense it almost hurts. She saved me. She doesn't know it, not fully, but she saved me. She showed me that love isn't about perfection or grand gestures. It's about being there day after day through the good and the bad, the easy and the impossibly hard. It's about choosing each other over and over again, even when it would be easier to walk away. Hey, I say, nudging her gently. You know I love you, right? I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. She looks up at me, her eyes shining. I know, she says, and I love you too. Now stop being so sappy and help me get Lily inside. She's going to be covered in mosquito bites. I laugh, the sound surprising me. It's a real laugh, easy and unforced, the kind of laugh I thought I'd lost forever. I stand up and walk out into the yard, scooping Lily up in my arms. She squeals with delight, her little hands patting my face, her laughter mixing with the chirping of the crickets. I carry her inside, Claire close behind, and the door closes on the evening. The fireflies keep dancing outside, tiny lights in the darkness, and I realize that's what I've become. A tiny light in the darkness, not perfect, not whole, but present, alive, and that's more than enough. I didn't think there was going to be a part 5. I thought the story was over, that I'd closed the book on that chapter of my life and walked away with a scar and a family and a peace that felt almost too good to be true. But life has a way of circling back, of bringing you face to face with the ghosts you thought you'd buried, and mine came knocking on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. I was in the backyard trying to fix the latch on the gate that had been sticking for weeks when Claire called out from the kitchen window. "Jack, there's someone at the door for you." Her voice had that peculiar tension in it, the kind she got when she was trying to sound casual but wasn't quite pulling it off. I wiped my hands on my jeans and walked through the house, my boots tracking mud across the floor I'd just mopped, and when I opened the front door, I felt the air leave my lungs. It was Mia. She was standing on my porch, soaking wet, her hair plastered to her face and her clothes clinging to her like a second skin. She looked older than I remembered, thinner, with hollows under her cheekbones that hadn't been there before. She was wearing a cheap raincoat that did nothing to keep the water out, and she was shivering, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I just stood there, my hand still on the doorknob, staring at the woman who had once been the center of my universe. The woman who had destroyed me, the woman I had spent years learning to forgive. She looked so small, so fragile, so utterly unlike the confident, composed person I'd known that I almost didn't recognize her. "Jack," she said, her voice trembling, "I know I have no right to be here. I know you probably hate me, but I didn't know where else to go. I didn't have anyone else." I felt a dozen different emotions surge through me at once. Anger, old and familiar, rose up like bile in my throat, but it was quickly followed by something else, something I hadn't expected. Pity, the kind of deep, bone-weary pity you feel for a stray dog that's been kicked one too many times. I stepped aside and held the door open. "Get inside," I said. "You're soaking." She hesitated, like she was waiting for me to change my mind, and then she stepped over the threshold into my home. Claire was standing at the end of the hallway, Lily clutched to her hip, her expression unreadable. I gave her a look, one of those silent conversations that couples develop over years of being together, and she nodded almost imperceptibly. She took Lily into the living room and closed the door, giving me the privacy I needed. Mia stood in the middle of the entryway, dripping onto my hardwood floor, looking around at the house with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't jealousy or resentment. It was something closer to awe, like she was seeing a life she never thought she'd be a part of. "Nice place," she said, her voice hollow. "Thanks," I said. "What are you doing here, Mia? How did you even find me?" She pulled a crumpled piece of paper out of her pocket, a napkin with an address scrawled on it in faded ink. "Your brother," she said. "I called him. I told him I needed to talk to you, and he gave me this. He said you'd probably want to tell me to go to hell, but I had to try. I had to see you." "Mike gave you my address?" I asked, incredulous. I made a mental note to have a very pointed conversation with my brother later. That doesn't answer my question. Why are you here? She took a shaky breath and I saw her eyes start to glisten. Ethan's dead, she said. He died 3 weeks ago, overdose. He'd been clean for almost a year, but he relapsed. They found him in his apartment. He was alone. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my hand reaching out to brace myself against the wall. Ethan, dead. My best friend, the man I'd known since we were kids, the man who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, was gone, just like that. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me and I had to close my eyes for a moment to steady myself. When I opened them again, Mia was still standing there, her face wet with tears, her whole body shaking with silent sobs. His funeral is next week, she said. I know you probably don't want to come. I know you have every right to stay as far away as possible, but I thought you should know. I thought you deserved to hear it from me, not from some random post online. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. My mind was racing, trying to process this new reality. Ethan was dead. The guy I'd hated for so long, the guy I'd wished all kinds of terrible things on in the darkest moments of my grief, was gone. And instead of feeling relief, instead of feeling vindicated, I just felt hollow, empty, like a part of me, a part I'd thought I'd buried, was still connected to him and now it was severed. Why are you here, Mia? I asked again, my voice barely above a whisper. You could have called, you could have sent a letter. Why did you have to come here to my home, to my family, and lay this on me? She looked down at her hands, her fingers twisting together nervously. Because I needed to see you, she said. I needed to look you in the eye and tell you how sorry I am for everything, for what I did to you, for what I let Ethan do to you, for the way I destroyed your life. I've been carrying this guilt for years, Jack. It's eaten me alive. I can't sleep. I can't eat. I can't have a single relationship without it falling apart because I'm terrified of hurting someone the way I hurt you. And when Ethan died, when I found out he was gone, I realized I couldn't keep carrying this. I had to let it go. I had to tell you, even if you told me to leave, even if you screamed at me and slammed the door in my face, I had to try. I stared at her, this broken, pathetic woman who had once held so much power over me, and I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had been simmering under the surface, the residual bitterness that I'd thought I'd conquered, it started to dissolve. Not completely, not all at once, but enough. Enough for me to see her not as the villain of my story, but as a fellow traveler on this miserable, chaotic journey called life. She was broken just like I'd been broken, she was lost just like I'd been lost, and she was reaching out in the only way she knew how for a lifeline. Let me get you a towel, I said, and some dry clothes. You're going to catch a cold if you keep standing there like that. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. You're not going to throw me out, she asked. No, I said, I'm not going to throw you out. I'm going to get you a towel, and then we're going to talk, not about the past, not about the pain, we're going to talk about Ethan, and we're going to figure out how to move forward. I left her standing in the entryway and went to the hall closet, grabbing a clean towel and a sweatshirt of mine that I figured would fit her well enough. I handed them to her and she took them with trembling hands, her eyes still fixed on my face like she was waiting for me to change my mind. The bathroom is down the hall, second door on the right, I said. Take your time. When you're ready, I'll be in the kitchen. She nodded and disappeared into the bathroom, leaving me alone with the weight of everything she'd just told me. I walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter, my hands gripping the edge of the sink. Ethan was dead. I'd spent so many nights fantasizing about what I'd say to him if I ever saw him again, the cutting words, the righteous anger, the final, devastating blow that would make him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. And now he was gone, and I'd never get the chance. I'd never get the chance to forgive him in person, to tell him that I understood, that I'd moved on, that I didn't hate him anymore. The finality of it was crushing. Claire came into the kitchen, her footsteps soft on the tile floor. She wrapped her arms around me from behind, resting her head on my shoulder. Are you okay? She asked. No, I said, I'm not sure I'll ever be okay, but I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. Do you want me to stay? She asked. I can put Lily down for a nap and stay with you. No, I said. I need to do this alone, but thank you for understanding. She kissed my cheek and left the kitchen, closing the door softly behind her. I stood there staring out the window at the rain-slicked street, waiting for Mia to emerge from the bathroom. When she finally did, she was wearing my sweatshirt, the sleeves rolled up to her elbows, her hair still damp but no longer dripping. She looked younger somehow, like the weight of the rain had washed away some of the years. I'm sorry about your floor, she said, gesturing at the puddles she'd left behind. I'll clean it up, I promise. Don't worry about it, I said. Just sit down. Do you want some coffee, tea, something stronger? Coffee, she said, taking a seat at the kitchen table. Black, please. I made us both coffee, the familiar ritual grounding me in a way I hadn't expected. I sat down across from her, my hands wrapped around my mug, and I waited for her to speak. She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes distant, and then she started to talk. She told me about the years after we'd broken up, the marriage to Ethan, the slow, painful unraveling of everything they'd tried to build. She told me about the fights, the accusations, the constant, suffocating guilt that poisoned every moment of happiness they tried to claim. She told me about the day she found out he was using again, the day she walked out and never looked back. She told me about the phone call she'd gotten from his sister telling her that he was gone. I thought I was doing the right thing, she said, her voice cracking. I thought if I left him, if I cut ties, he'd get help, he'd hit rock bottom and he'd climb back up, but he didn't, he just fell and I wasn't there to catch him, I wasn't there. Neither was I said quietly. I wasn't there either. I was so focused on my own pain, my own anger, that I didn't see what was happening to him. I didn't see that he was drowning. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of our shared grief pressing down on us. It was strange, sitting across from this woman who had been the source of so much of my pain and feeling a connection with her. Not a romantic connection, not even a friendly one. Just the connection of two people who had loved the same man in different ways and had both lost him. I'm not going to the funeral, I said finally. I can't, I'm not ready for that, but I want to do something. I want to honor him, not the person he became at the end, but the person he used to be, the person I knew before everything went wrong. Mia nodded, tears streaming down her face. I think he'd like that, she said. I think he'd really like that. We talked for another hour about Ethan, about the past, about the future. It wasn't easy. There were moments when the old anger threatened to resurface, when I caught myself looking at her and feeling the familiar sting of betrayal, but I pushed through it. I pushed through it because I knew that the only way to truly move on was to let go of the resentment that had been poisoning me for so long. When she finally left, standing on my porch in the fading light, she turned to me one last time. Thank you, Jack, she said, for everything, for giving me a chance, for not slamming the door in my face. You're welcome, I said. Take care of yourself, Mia. I mean it. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to move on. She smiled, a sad, fragile smile, and then she was gone, walking down the street toward the bus stop, her figure growing smaller and smaller until it disappeared around the corner. I closed the door and leaned against it, the exhaustion of the day settling over me like a heavy blanket. I heard Claire's footsteps behind me, and then she was there, her arms around me, her warmth seeping into my bones. It's over, I said. It's finally over. It's over, she echoed, and you're still here, you're still standing. I nodded, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. I'd spent so long running from the past, trying to outrun the pain and the shame and the guilt. But the past had finally caught up with me, and instead of destroying me, it had set me free. I'd forgiven Mia, I'd forgiven Ethan, and in doing so, I'd finally forgiven myself. The next week, I went to the cemetery where Ethan was buried. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I just drove, the directions Mia had given me burning a hole in my pocket. It was a small cemetery on the edge of town, the kind of place that looked like it had been there for 100 years and would be there for 100 more. I found his grave, a simple marker with his name and dates, and I stood there for a long time looking at it. I didn't say anything, I didn't pray, I just stood there letting the silence wash over me, and then I did something I never thought I'd do. I sat down on the grass, cross-legged, like I used to sit when we were kids, and I talked to him. I told him about my life, about Claire and Lily and the house with the porch. I told him about the forgiveness I'd found, the peace I'd made with the past. I told him I was sorry that things had ended the way they did, that I regretted the years of anger and silence. I told him I missed him, that I missed the person he used to be, the person who'd been my brother in everything but blood, and then I said goodbye. When I got home, Claire was waiting for me on the porch. She didn't ask where I'd been, she didn't need to. She just took my hand and led me inside, where Lily was waiting, her face bright with a smile that made everything else fade away. I picked her up, holding her close, and I felt the last of the old pain slip away. It was gone, not forgotten, never forgotten, but gone. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly, completely free.
তোর কারণে শেষ করিলাম ইহকাল আর পরকাল, তোর কারণে শেষ করিলাম ইহকাল আর পরকাল। কে জানিত হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানিত হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল। দুঃখের পরে আসে রে সুখ, আমার বেলায় নাই, আবেগে তাকাইলেই যেন প্লাবন হইয়া যায়। দুঃখের পরে আসে রে সুখ, আমার বেলায় নাই, আবেগে তাকাইলেই যেন প্লাবন হইয়া যায়। যতনে তুলিয়া গাছে টাইনা টাইনা তুলে সাল, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল। কাদা মাটি মিশ্র কইরা বানাইলাম এক পাখি, কারণ সারাই নোটিশ দিয়া করিল চালাকি। কাদা মাটি মিশ্র কইরা বানাইলাম এক পাখি, কারণ সারাই নোটিশ দিয়া করিল চালাকি। কই মল্লিকে মরলেই বাঁচি, আমার নিশির নাই সকাল, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল। তোর কারণে শেষ করিলামি হকাল আর পরকাল, তোর কারণে শেষ করিলামি হকাল আর পরকাল, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল আমার, কে জানি তো হবে এমন পুরিবে কপাল।